The internet built a punching bag out of a famous kid, then called it entertainment. Let me tell you exactly how the internet destroys someone before breakfast. A podcast record. A clip gets pulled. Someone with a reaction channel sees it, adds a dramatic title, and uploads within the hour. Then another creator reacts to that reaction. Then a gossip page packages all of it into a headline that sounds like confirmed news, but is built entirely on the first clip and 3 people's opinions about it. And by the time any actual verified information exists, millions of people have already formed a complete narrative, picked a side, and started defending it in comment sections like they were personally present for whatever allegedly happened. That is the King Harris situation. And the fact that almost nobody can tell you exactly what happened with precision does not matter anymore, because the internet already decided what it meant, who was wrong, and what it says about him as a person. Welcome to modern celebrity culture, where the story spreads at the speed of algorithms, and the facts catch up sometime next week if they catch up at all. Here is what actually exists in terms of documented reality. Son of T.I. and Tiny, a young man who has grown up with cameras pointed at his family since before he could form complete sentences, appeared in a podcast context where jokes were made, tension existed, and the internet decided that was enough to generate a full controversy cycle. Clips circulated, commentary channels ran with it. Reaction creators attached increasingly dramatic interpretations to limited information, and within hours, the story had grown considerably larger than whatever actually happened in the room. Some creators presented situations as a serious confrontation. Others admitted they were simply reacting to what was already trending. The distinction between those two things, reporting and reacting, is the entire problem, and almost nobody online was drawing that line clearly. Now let's talk about what this situation is actually revealing, because the King Harris story is almost secondary to the larger dynamic it exposed. Podcast culture has a specific and increasingly documented problem. Hosts and guests have collectively figured out that discomfort generates engagement, that mockery generates engagement, that pushing someone until they visibly react generates engagement. The more uncomfortable the moment, the faster the clip spreads, the higher the view count climbs, and the more the algorithm rewards everyone involved except the person who was being pushed. That is not an accident. That is a content strategy. And when the target is a young person who grew up famous, who has been navigating public judgment since childhood, who has never had the option of being ordinary, the discomfort is easier to generate and the reaction is easier to provoke, which makes it more valuable as content, which makes it more likely to be targeted deliberately. King Harris did not choose to be T.I.'s son. He did not choose to be born into a family whose entire professional existence is documented and public. He did not choose to grow up with the internet forming opinions about him before he had the tools to manage what that meant psychologically. And yet the scrutiny he faces is treated as a natural consequence of visibility, as though visibility is something he opted into the way his parents did, rather than something he was born into before he could consent to any of it. There is a specific cruelty that the internet applies to celebrity children that it rarely names honestly. It is not the same as the scrutiny that applies to their parents, who made deliberate professional choices that brought public attention. Celebrity kids exist in a gray zone, public enough to be mocked, young enough that the mockery carries a different weight, and enough face that sympathy is considered optional, because surely money compensates for everything. It does not. Money does not make being publicly humiliated in front of millions of people less psychologically damaging. It just means you have nicer surroundings while you process it. King Harris has been on the receiving end of internet commentary for years, not because of things he did in a professional capacity that warranted public examination, but because he is recognizable and because mockery of recognizable people generates content that performs well. The podcast situation, whatever its specific details, landed in a context that was already loaded with years of that kind of accumulated public judgment. And when someone who has been absorbing that kind of attention for years finally reacts visibly to it, the internet's response is to generate even more content about the reaction. The cycle is self-sustaining and deliberately so. The supporters who pushed back on the narrative argued something that gets dismissed too quickly, that there is a difference between public public figures who entered public life through deliberate, professional choices and young people who grew up inside someone else's public life and are still figuring out who they are while millions of strangers watch and comment and form opinions in real time. That difference matters. It does not make anyone immune from accountability for their own actions, but it does mean that the standard of what constitutes fair scrutiny should not be identical across all public figures, regardless of age and circumstance. Critics responded, as they always do, that fame brings attention, and attention brings judgment, and public figures should develop thicker skin, which is technically true and also completely sidesteps the question of whether the judgment being delivered is proportionate, fair, or serving any purpose beyond entertainment for the people delivering it. Telling someone to develop thicker skin is not a defense of the behavior that requires the thick skin. It is just a way of closing the conversation before it reaches the part where the people doing the mocking might have to examine their own participation. And that is the part nobody wants to examine: the audience. Not the creators who made the content, not the podcast hosts who created the moment, but the millions of ordinary people who clicked, watched, reacted, shared, and commented. Because the ecosystem that monetizes emotional conflict involving young public figures does not exist in a vacuum. It exists because there is enormous demand for it, because people find it entertaining, because watching someone visibly struggle or react or lose composure scratches something in the human brain that calm, measured conversation simply does not. The algorithm rewards it because the audience rewards it. The audience rewards it because the platform makes it frictionless to do so. And somewhere in that loop, the actual human being at the center of the content becomes secondary to the engagement it generates. That is not a new observation about internet culture, but it is one that keeps getting made and keeps being ignored, because ignoring it is considerably more comfortable than sitting with what it says about the people doing the clicking. What made this controversy explode as aggressively as it did was not any single confirmed detail about what happened. It was the combination of a recognizable name, an emotionally charged setting, the word confrontation appearing in enough headlines to trigger the automatic assumption that something serious had occurred, and an internet ecosystem that is structurally designed to amplify that assumption faster than any correction or context can travel. Viral celebrity panic spreads at algorithm speed. Facts spread at human speed. The gap between those two speeds is where reputations get built and destroyed, where narratives take root before evidence arrives, and where young public figures who grew up in famous families get turned into content whether they want to be or not. King Harris is going to be fine. He has resources and family and a platform of his own. But the pattern that produced this controversy is not fine, and it is not going anywhere, and the next young person it targets may not have the same structural support available. That is the actual conversation this situation was always pointing toward. The internet just found the drama more interesting than the point. Drop your honest take in the comments. Do you think podcast culture has gone too far with how it treats celebrity guests, or is this just how public life works now? Like the video if this breakdown gave you something real to think about, and subscribe so you are here for the next one. See you then.